Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on owlscoop.com. You already know.
Everybody, welcome back to The Scoop, owlscoop.com's podcast. This is season 7, episode 4. I'm John DiCarlo, joined by Sam Cohn and Dante Colonelli. Kyle Gauss is off tonight. We were going to try to record a little bit earlier, wanted to wait for the storm to calm down. We know that we have listeners in South Jersey and some of the areas in southeastern PA where the tornado hit. So we certainly hope that everybody is okay. That you took all the proper precautions, but hearts go out to all of you who were affected by the storm, and hope everyone's safe and sound, and hope you can enjoy the game tomorrow and watch some football, but definitely appreciate you guys listening. And again, we do hope that everybody is okay out there. I've seen some of the footage and it's not good, especially some of the stuff in South Jersey. So we do hope that everybody's okay. Got a lot to talk about. We'll get right to the task at hand, which is to talk about this Temple Rutgers season opener. We're definitely not out of COVID by any means, but it looks like it will hopefully be a lot more of a normal college football season, we hope. I'm going to be teaching a class tomorrow night, so I'm actually not going to be up at Rutgers, but Dante's going to be up there for us. Sam is, as we've explained before, part of our staff, but also with the Philadelphia Inquirer now. He's going to be covering the game up there. You guys excited to hit, I guess, a mini road trip and head up and cover some college football?
I can't wait. Rod said on Monday, it's time for football. We've spent the last 25 fall practices, the summer, spring camp, waiting. I mean, after the end of last year ended on such a strange note with the way the ECU game played out and then the cancellation of the Cincinnati game. It feels like this is a long time coming of what feels more like normal football. Supposedly Rutgers will be sold out, will be in front of a sold out crowd. So excited to have some real football, kind of move past a lot of the storylines that we've been able to really dive into the last couple of weeks and just actually see a product on the field.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm excited. I don't know if I believe that Rutgers is sold out, but I hope they are, because it'll be awesome, man. Just the electricity in the building, if it's actually sold out. And I know it's a Rutgers crowd, it's not like we're going up to Penn State or anything, but it'll just be cool to just feel that again at all. Sitting in the press box last year, I'm sure both of you guys probably agree. It was weird. It was just oddly quiet at all times, on the field, and there was nobody around. It was just a very odd experience. So I'm hoping that there are a lot of fans there. I'm hoping that it is a sellout and it'll be cool. I'm pretty excited. I've never been up there either. So, and I like going to new stadiums. So that's another big one for me.
Yeah. It's nice.
Sorry, John, to cut you off. My last memory of covering a Temple football game was sitting 10 feet away from Dante with a delayed start and a lot of strange COVID protocols, wearing a mask. I mean, obviously we'll be wearing a mask again. I'm not sure what their protocols are in the press box, but to see fans and to see some football again is exciting.
Yeah, that ECU game, man. What a weird, we have come so far from that game. Yeah, really, what a day. We just show up and they're like, yeah, Matt Duncan is suspended, and then the game is delayed and all these players are out. It's just, wow. I can't believe that was the last time we went to a game.
All right, so we know the drill. The Temple is trying its best to rebound from a 1-6 season. Rutgers was a 3-win team last year, but they won all 3 of their games on the road. And Greg Schiano is in his second tour of duty at Rutgers. We know the Temple, if you've been listening to this podcast and following our coverage, Temple got away for a couple of weeks, went up to SUNY Maritime up in the Bronx to get away for camp. They have since returned. And again, it's game week now. It's a 6:30 p.m. kickoff. If you're watching from home, you can watch on the Big Ten Network. Again, Sam and Dante are going to be up there for us, so we'll have coverage of the game. You'll be able to check out, as you're listening to this now, check out Dante's game day preview for us that's got you covered. We'll kind of go right down the line here. Again, I think it's the easiest place to start, but it's the most relevant place to start. And again, he has yet to play a game in a Temple uniform, but I think it's safe to assume that all eyes are going to be on Dewan Mathis, the Georgia transfer. Obviously, he can't win the game by himself. A lot of things will have to go right for Temple to win this game. And I think we're probably all in agreement here, right? I mean, it's not a Rutgers team that's likely to win the Big Ten. I mean, I think they're, again, for whatever preseason polls are worth, I think they're picked to finish second to last in the Big Ten East, but they've got some players, and they've got, and we'll talk about this, they've got a very good secondary. They've got some weapons on offense. They're going to be dangerous in the return game on special teams. So this isn't exactly an ideal matchup for Temple right out of the gate. But we'll talk about DeJuan Mathis. Again, we've had the opportunity to watch him a little bit in practice. We know he has the arm. We know he has the ability. We know that his teammates have been raving about him. What are you guys expecting from him tomorrow? I know it's a simple question, but again, I think that's one thing that fans have to look forward to is the new quarterback, the intrigue of a guy that at this time last year was starting, albeit briefly, for an SEC program. We know he was a former 4-star recruit. Anytime we've had the chance to talk to him, I think he's been pretty good and pretty eloquent about, talking about what life was like growing up. He started, getting recruited in 8th grade, getting offers in 8th grade. He committed to Iowa State as a sophomore, then Michigan State. Then, Urban Meyer and Ryan Day kept recruiting him. He commits to Ohio State. And then, it's funny to think of this at the time, Justin Fields, who at some point we'd think will probably be the Chicago Bears starter. I hope he will be, because he's my backup quarterback in fantasy football. And looks like a hell of a quarterback. Anyway, nobody cares about my fantasy football team. I know that's a,
we care about your fantasy football
no, that
team,
is like cardinal rule of society. Nobody cares about your fantasy team. Everybody can just skip past that part. But, at one point, Justin Fields was a Georgia quarterback. He transfers to Ohio State. So there was all this like last minute maneuvering on signing day or prior to signing day. And DeJuan Mathis ends up at Georgia, started last year's season opener. I think he went 8 of 17, got banged up. Again, I think I said this earlier today with Pat Egan on the Fanatic. I'm not sure if they ever fully announced it, but we think he was concussed and got banged up and never really regained the starting role there, played in a few more games, but transferred to Temple, talked about how Rod Carey was the head coach he heard from the most. And so here he is at Temple. And again, I think we can all agree that the talent's there, the intrigue is there. Again, as I said earlier, his teammates have been raving about him. Now we get to see, tomorrow night, or if you're listening to this, tonight, just how good he can be. Again, it'll be one game. Not to say that we'll judge him off of this one game, but, again, as Dante said, as Rod Carey said, it's time for football. What are you guys expecting from him tomorrow? Knowing, again, what we know on paper of this Rutgers defense, what are you guys expecting? What do you think he's capable of?
Yeah, I think, honestly, my expectations are pretty moderate. I think that there's a lot of context here with Mathis in that he just has not played a lot of football, like in general. He lost a season at Georgia for the brain surgery. He was the starter last year. He only got through a half of that Arkansas game, came in for about a half against Florida. This is a player who has not played a lot of football. The last time he saw a high volume of reps was high school. So my expectations for DeJuan Mathis, frankly, are pretty low. And I think that this is a good test for him to kind of come out. And you know what? This is, Temple isn't expected to win this football game. So if this is the game that you're going to come out and you want to knock some rust off, this isn't the worst opponent to have for that specific reason. And I think the big thing for Mathis, like John said, the ability's there. I mean, there's absolutely, his arm's great. He's a mobile quarterback. He can do all the things that you want from a modern day signal caller. I think the question when you watch the limited film that we have of him from Georgia, at least for me, was the mental part of playing quarterback, right? Like there's just a lot of bad decisions, a lot of holding the ball too long. So I'll be interested to see like how he executes the offense. Is he holding the ball too long? Different things like that. What are his reads look like? How much does his staff trust him? But again, I think if he goes out there and he keeps Temple competitive and he gives them a chance to win this game, I think that's a win. I really do. I think that's a good starting point and a good expectation for the season, because again, this is a guy who, really he hasn't really played at all really in college. He took, he threw like 17 passes or whatever last year. That's nothing. So this is really going to be his first like full-fledged game action. So my expectations are not low because I think that Mathis is bad. It's just low because I don't think it would be fair to him to expect a ton in this opener. But again, that also gives him the opportunity to impress as well with low expectations. So I think that if he can show command of the offense and he's, making good decisions and he keeps tempo in this game, I think that's a win no matter what the outcome is.
I would second what Dante said. I'd be hard pressed to believe that he doesn't make a couple mistakes early on. It's whether it's a drive or two that kind of takes him to really find his footing and get his groove. It's funny when he spoke to reporters. Again, we're recording this on Thursday, so he spoke with reporters on. Today's Wednesday. Recording this on Wednesday. They play on Thursday. When he spoke to reporters on Tuesday, he had said something along the lines of like, "It is impossible in college football to replicate like a live game in scrimmages. It's impossible to replicate that in practice." And he hasn't played a whole lot of football, as Dante and John, you both mentioned. So he had said a lot of what he's trying to do, kind of going into this game and preparation-wise, is sort of channel who he was as a true freshman. He said he almost feels like a freshman again. It's like it's almost a new start for him. He's kind of trying to channel who he was when he first got into his first live action at Georgia. So I would second what Dante said. I'm keeping my expectations pretty moderate, and I think that if he goes out there and he has a solid day, if he minimizes his mistakes, looks like he has some chemistry with his receivers, some continuity in the backfield, some understanding of. It looks like he has a clear understanding of the playbook of the offense and things run generally smoothly. Whether or not they win, I think that's a win for DeJuan Mathis in game one.
Let's take a little bit of a closer look at this Rutgers secondary. I know, Dante, you and I have talked about this. You've seen a lot of different players, for the work that you do for Blue Chip Scouting. And I guess Temple catches a little bit of a break here because Patrice Renee, the North Carolina transfer, who's hurt, is out and won't be playing. So Max Melton will be playing in his place. Then you have Trey Avery at the other cornerback spot. And then Avery Young at safety, Christian Izzian at strong safety. It's a good secondary, a couple of potential future pros there. When I asked Rod Carey that question on Monday, he kind of bristled a little bit. And I don't, to be clear here, I'm not trying to start things up. I don't think he was saying that they weren't good, but he said something to the effect of like, well, I think that remains to be seen, but this is a pretty good Rutgers secondary. So 2-part question for you, Dante. How much does it help Temple that, a guy like Patrice Renee is out? And, how good are these guys? Are again, I know there's a long way between September 2nd and the NFL draft, but are these a couple of legitimate future pros that we're looking at here that DeJuan Mathis is going to be looking at when he looks out at that secondary?
Yeah, I think we are. And to answer your first question, Renee being out is huge because they brought him in from North Carolina, right? A UNC transfer, and they wanted to bump Avery Young to safety, right? Avery Young was a corner last year and they bumped him to free safety. So Renee being out forces a player that they did not want to play to be in, obviously, but it also, they're keeping Avery Young at free safety. They're not bumping him back to corner. So what that tells me is that their safety depth is not as good as their corner depth. But I think that obviously Renee being out is huge. Rutgers felt good enough about him to move Avery Young, who, to answer your second question, I do think is a future pro. I do think that he has the ability to get there. Now, look, he is not, this is not Derek Stingley Jr. out here at corner for Rutgers, but he's a good football player. He's got good size, good ball skills. Moving him to safety is interesting. It'll force him to play in man coverage a little bit less. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I do think that he's a future pro. I think he's probably a day 3 guy, but, that's still something. Christian Inzian, the other safety, the strong safety, is really, really interesting. He's a guy who plays all over the place. He's kind of like their version of Amir Tyler, except he plays a little bit more in coverage than Amir does for us. Very, very physical player, had 4 interceptions last season. He had a couple of pass breakups, had a couple of fumbles. He's always around the ball. He's just a constant ball producer. He's good in coverage. He's scrappy. So yeah, these are legit guys, especially at safety. I think Avery Young, Christian Inzian have potential NFL futures. They're not cinches. They're not all world prospects, but they're good. And they're going to be a challenge for a young quarterback. And, for a quarterback who gets to the line, right, Mathis, any quarterback, the first thing that they're going to do is wear the safeties, right? Like that's the first check mark for a quarterback when they look at the line of scrimmage. So Young and Inzian being back there, we'll have to see how Mathis handles that. Those guys are going to move around. Say what you want about Greg Schiano. He knows how to coach defense. That is not going to be an easy unit to, read pre-snap. They're going to move around. They're going to challenge Mathis mentally. And those two guys I think are future pros. So I think it is very good, though, that Rene is out, because that might allow you to test the corners outside and stay away from the middle of the field a little bit, where those safeties will be lurking depending on what coverages they want to run out there. So that's a huge advantage for Temple. Honestly, if Rene was in there, I think that makes their life significantly harder.
Let's look at this Temple offensive line. They have, numbers wise, this is a group that has the 7th most starts in FBS, which is, definitely a good thing. I think we can agree that, they're bringing some pretty solid players back. A guy they'll have to be mindful of is Mohammed Toray. Again, if you follow this Temple program, you follow recruiting, which I know a lot of you do. He's a guy that Temple really recruited hard, didn't get down the stretch, kind of a defensive end, rush, stand-up linebacker type of guy. Led them with 4.5 sacks last year. What do we think of this front seven? And again, we'll get to Fadakazi and Tyshawn Fogg in a second, because again, we're looking at an inexperienced running back group too. It's going to be going up against some good linebackers, but I guess Temple has that one thing, not the only thing going for it on offense, but they're bringing back a pretty solid group of offensive linemen. How much of an asset is that for them in this game? Again, you got a new quarterback, you've got new running backs, mostly new running backs, which we know. You do bring back Jaden Blue and Randall Jones, two of the better receivers in the conference, but how good do we think this offensive line is going to be coming back, with CJ Perez, Adam Klein, and the whole group?
Yeah, I think, go ahead. No, go ahead, Sam.
I guess just really quickly, I think the first noteworthy thing is that CJ Perez was banged up a little bit, but he'll be fine,
right,
for the Rutgers game. So it sounds like through and through, they're a pretty healthy group. But the number that stands out to me is, this is an offensive line that led the conference in allowing the fewest sacks per game.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to imagine that keeping predominantly that same group coming back a year later, that's probably the group that is going to look the best out of the gate across the board for Temple. Is a group that it performed extremely well last year and is returning just about the entire group.
And again, we're talking about Isaac Moore at left tackle, who it's kind of seemingly bounced back. Joe Hooper at left guard, CJ Perez, the center, as Sam mentioned, Adam Klein at right guard, and then Michael Neese, the Dayton transfer, at right tackle. Again, so a lot of starting experience there. Dante, do you think this Rutgers front seven poses a big problem for them? You think this is a matchup where Temple can at least control the line of scrimmage, or is it just, I know we try not to be too hot takey on this podcast, or is it just a situation where we're literally just going to have to see how things go, because we're coming off a COVID season where, Rutgers, played 9 games, Temple played 7 games, and we still just don't know what the hell to make of this whole thing.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think the running game is going to be a little bit harder to judge, because Temple's line, while experienced, struggled in that area last year. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what that's going to look like against the Rutgers defensive line. They've got a couple of fringe pros, I think, guys who have a chance to be pro, but not quite like that secondary where I think they have a good shot. So, but where I do think Temple certainly has an advantage is in pass protection. Those guys are really good. Like Sam said last year, just protecting the quarterback, giving him time was one of the few bright spots on that offense last year, is that, regardless of what was happening, they weren't giving up a lot of sacks. So I think that's an area where they can win. Up front, like just another name to add is like Julius Turner, defensive tackle. He's a little bit undersized, but he's very explosive. He got in there on Justin Fields a couple times against Ohio State last year, so he flashes. But I think in pass protection, that's where they'll be strong. Now, the big thing is, John, you mentioned this, they're kind of working with like a makeshift backfield. If they can open up holes, and I wrote this in the preview, if you guys read that on well, it should be up by now, and this is coming out in the morning, but like if they can open up holes for those running backs, like that's just, it's going to make their job a whole lot easier. It is, running backs can run through holes. Any running back can be productive if an offensive line is good, especially in college football. It's like really, I've seen guys who run like 5 flat in the 40, rush for 1,000 yards, so like if the offensive line can win that battle, Temple's got a shot to win this game. I think that's one of like the key tipping points is how they're able to run the ball and kind of keep that Rutgers secondary in check a little bit. But I don't know, John. I really don't. Like you said, like it's just I don't know how much better Temple's gotten. I don't know how much better Rutgers defensive line has gotten at stopping the run. They weren't good at it last year. Frankly, they gave up like almost 300 or 200 plus rushing yards a game last year. So I don't know. We'll see, but that's a huge deal. If Temple can open up lanes, make the lives of these young running backs easy, it's going to, it's going to make this game a lot more competitive.
As we know too, I think with any fan base, with any college program, the offensive coordinator, if the head coach is the most scrutinized guy out there, the offensive coordinator is probably like 1A on that group. And I've seen every single, if we look at, ever since the Al Golden started to turn things around in 2006, I mean, every Temple offensive coordinator at some point has been criticized. And we're talking about some good guys who, George DeLeon, who coached Donovan McNabb and Marvin Harrison at Syracuse and has been in the NFL. Matt Rule was an co-offensive coordinator at one point. Guys that have been, obviously Matt's coaching the NFL now with the Panthers, but there's going to be a lot of focus again on what can Mike Yuremevich and this group do with DeJuan Mathis. I'll be certainly interested in what the play calling is like. Are they going to have him throwing a lot at first? Are they going to have some designed runs? I think we're all kind of in agreement that maybe we won't see as many design runs as we think, and it might be a situation where he just gets more creative and extending plays out of the pocket. But I wonder how committed they will be to the run to kind of see what they can do against that front seven. Again, Rutgers has some a couple of pretty good linebackers too, so they're definitely not chopped liver there. But how committed will they be to the run? Again, I don't know how much Ruley's going to get the ball. Tavon Ruley's going to get the ball. If you haven't had the chance to check out the depth chart, so Ed Sadie and Trey Blair, who played safety last year, he's now the listed as the number 2 back. They say that they like the intriguing options that they have there, but again, a lot of question marks. Ed Sadie hasn't played, got some carries last year, but isn't a guy that's logged 150 carries or anything like that. They like Trey Blair. Trey Blair was a heck of a dual threat quarterback at Haverford High School, but it's going to be his first time as a college running back. So again, it's a bit of an untested group there. Do you guys think they'll be committed to the run and trying to kind of soften up that group, or do you think they'll be pass heavy?
That's a good question. I feel like I've gone back and forth on that a little bit. If you asked me yesterday when I thought it was going to rain like crazy, then I'd say, yeah, they're going to really focus on keeping the ball on the ground, and they're not going to really test DeJuan in that kind of weather yet. But I would imagine my inclination is that they're probably more pass heavy, just because it doesn't sound at least like they have an established, like, this is I'm sure they do. It's hard for me to imagine they don't have an established run game plan. I almost caught myself saying that, but it doesn't sound like they really have. They're not where they want to be. It sounds like they're still in the testing phase of that backfield. So I would imagine they're probably more pass heavy.
Yeah, I would echo that. Frankly, I just think it would be smart to be pass heavy. It leans into the strengths of your own team. Your 2 best offensive players are wide receivers, probably. Your offensive line is significantly better at pass blocking than run blocking. You just got a quarterback with a cannon for an arm. I just think that is the strength of this team. Now, obviously, like I said, when we talked in the last segment, is like, yeah, running the ball is going to be important. If they can win there, that'll be huge for them. But the strength of your team is going to be throwing the football, right? Like, they have good wide receiver depth. The offensive line can pass block. You need to see what you have in DeJuan Mathis. I'm not a huge fan of slowly bringing along quarterbacks. I think that you have to figure it out eventually. Like, do it now against Rutgers. This is not a conference game. You can lose this game and it's not the end of the world. Let the kid throw the ball. So I would hope that's what they would do. Now, would it surprise me if Rod Carey comes out there and he says, no, we're going to run the ball, we're going to be conservative? No, it would not. But I hope that they don't, because I think that would just be a misuse of their strengths. Let Jaden Blue work against against the backup corner, let Randall Jones work against a backup corner, and try and expose those matchups on the outside. And I think that would be smart. And again, it leads to the strengths of your offensive line as well. But would it surprise me to see them come out and try and, set the tone and be Temple tough? No, it would not, but I don't think that would be smart.
Again, just a reminder, I know obviously there was a lot of excitement in the offseason with Temple getting Iverson Clement, transfer out of out of Florida, who played at Rancocas Valley High School. We were told this week he wouldn't be part of the game plan, still not fully back with the team yet, dealing with some personal issues, we've been told. So I don't know if this is going to be a rotation of Ed Sadie, Trey Blair. I guess, I mean, do we really know? I mean, Tavon Roy's been banged up. They've spoken favorably about Rayvon Bonner, the Illinois transfer, but they'd said that, I mean, he was out in the spring, had been banged up in the summer. So I don't know how much those guys will play. Again, in a typical game, you typically don't rotate 4 guys in unless you are blowing someone out and you're, cruising by the third quarter. I don't think that that's going to be the case for Temple. So I don't know how much, Rui is going to play or how much Rayvon Bonner plays, if we're going to see mostly Ed Sadie and Trey Blair. Before we move along to flipping things around, again, the depth chart comes out. I know there weren't too many surprises, but anything that caught either one of your eyes when the depth chart came out? And again, I know depth charts, I don't want to say they can be useless because, they could come out and first play the game in a, formation we haven't seen with some guys in positions that we didn't expect, to play early on. But when you look at the depth chart, any surprises there?
One thing I'll mention from the depth chart, which I think we can get more into when we get to the defensive side of the ball, is the fact that Temple has two transfers that they picked up, both starting at both cornerback positions with Keyshawn Paul and Cameron Ruiz. Two guys that are hard for us to kind of like judge that position right now because we haven't seen anything from them. I mean, Amir Tyler spoke pretty highly of them earlier this week, saying they've done a great job of both understanding the playbook, understanding the plays, and executing. He said there's a fine line between those two things of like guys get it and then guys go out and make those plays and show that they understand it with what they're executing on the field. And he said those two guys have shown a lot of maturity. So it sounds like those two definitely earn those spots, but I think for us who haven't really seen much of anything from those two guys since getting to Temple, it'll be exciting to watch those two.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered my big surprise. And that was like Trey Blair. Seeing him as RB2 was like very surprising. I mean, this is a player who literally just converted from safety. So to see him at RB2 is very interesting. I wonder if that is a designation for him as like, he's going to be the third down back, the pass catcher type guy, right? And that's why they listed him as that RB2 spot. I think the other one, I don't want to go too deep into this because it's a little bit off topic, but true freshman quarterback Justin Lynch is the backup. If DeJuan Mathis gets hurt, God forbid, on Thursday night, true freshman Justin Lynch is going to be coming into the game. I think that was certainly not surprising because we had kind of been building to that. It felt like all camp, like every time we asked about the quarterbacks, it was Lynch before Mitchell and Valenti. When we went to practice, it was Lynch taking QB2 reps over those two guys. So it wasn't a surprise in the sense that like we didn't see it coming as the media, but it was a surprise to have Justin Lynch come in and actually win that job. So again, I don't want to get too much into it because it's off topic, but certainly surprising to see a true freshman win that job right away.
The one last thing before we move over to the defensive side of the ball, I'd say another thing we don't know is of this group. And again, I think it's going to be a situation where it might take a few weeks to sort this out. Like who takes the lead on this? Is it Sadie? Is it Blair? Is it Kyle Dobbins? Do they sort this out? Does somebody just put up a ton of yards against Akron and get into a groove next week and they say, okay, this guy's our lead back? Because again, they're not going to rotate 4 guys in on any given week, but we don't even know who's going to be good, catching the ball out of the backfield. If they're going to throw a lot to the backs coming out of the backfield, that's going to be a big part of their game plan. So that's going to be another thing that will, I guess, have to reveal itself over the next few weeks. I'm not as surprised about Lynch. I mean, he's pretty much grown up in that offense and grown up around them, as Rod said, and I think Mike Yuremevich said it too. I mean, he knows that offense. I mean, his brother, lived it, played in it in Northern Illinois' heyday, parlayed it into a brief NFL career. I know when Jordan Lynch got to the NFL, he tried to make it as a running back, but he was a very, very good college quarterback. He was his younger brother's coach at Mount Carmel High School out in Chicago. So again, looks good throwing the ball too. He's not as tall as DeJuan Mathis, but I think they see him. I don't know if they've outright said this, but I think they see him as their quarterback of the future after DeJuan Mathis. And that's assuming, Mathis holds down the job. But as Dante said, if anything did happen to Mathis in this game, think Justin Lynch is going in there. Let's flip things around to Temple being on defense again. Looking at this Rutgers offense again, I think Noah Vedral more. I think we could call him more of a game manager at quarterback. Didn't put up great numbers last year throwing the ball. I think he threw more picks than touchdowns. Pretty solid running it. But they're going to be facing some good receivers here in Bo Melton, Aaron Cruikshank, again, who's also dangerous in the return game, returned 2 kickoffs for a touchdown last year. Sam, you mentioned Keyshawn Paul and Cameron Ruiz. We do know that they were good. I mean, they were solid at their previous, programs. Now, UConn didn't play last year, so Keyshawn Paul didn't play. Cameron Ruiz was, I guess, Dante White played more nickel than, more in the slot, I guess, like not necessarily a true outside guy as much, but was part of a very good Northwestern defense. So even though these guys have not played in a Temple uniform yet, they do come in right away and start, Freddie Johnson will be in the mix and some other guys as well. But how good are these receivers that they're facing here? How good is this offense? And again, that includes Isaiah Pacheco, running back. Again, they've got some playmakers on that side of the ball. What are the problems here for Temple? Who are the biggest, weapons that they're going to be tested by?
Yeah, I think the big one is Bo Melton, the wide receiver. This is a player who torched Michigan, put up good numbers against Ohio State. You want to talk about future pros on Rutgers. Melton's probably the biggest, the easiest cinch to be a draft pick. He's going to get looks from the Senior Bowl and stuff. So he's a legit potential NFL wide receiver. So I think he's the first one that you want to talk about. Very, very good with the ball in his hands. He's, really got good short area quickness, good open field moves. He's good down the field as well. He's a good deep ball tracker. He's got good speed. He would probably be their returner if they didn't have 2 of the best returners in the country already. So they are just incredibly deep at that spot. And I think Krishik is interesting. He's not as polished as Melton is as a receiver, but they're going to try and get him the ball on bubble screens and different things like that, reverses, jet sweeps. And he can house those. He really can. If your tackling isn't good and you're not prepared for his speed and his burst, he can house those. So I think those are the 2 guys that really pop for me. Pacheco's interesting. He's a good pass catching back as well. They like to throw him screens and run him out on motions and different things like that. But Melton's going to be tough. It's going to be, like Sam said, Temple's got 2 transfer corners who, and John said this too, they played well at their last spots, but this is going to be a big challenge for them. Melton's a legit guy. This is not the same Rutgers team that was the laughing stock of the Big Ten. They have some legit players. Melton's probably the best one. So that'll be the biggest challenge, I think, for this Temple defense, is containing those guys and their speed, because they're track stars really at the end of the day.
Pacheco's like Trey Blair. In Temple's case, Pacheco's a former, as far as I can recall, was a very good high school quarterback at Vineland High School down in South Jersey. Bo Melton, also a former South Jersey star. You guys had the chance, Sam was there for player availability earlier this week, talked to Amir Tyler. Here's what Amir Tyler, Temple's veteran safety, a 6-year player now, again, one of the guys that's coming back and taking advantage of that extra year of eligibility due to COVID. Again, the veteran leader of that group, one of 2 captains who was named this week on defense, and then Adam Klein named the captain on the offensive side of the ball. Here's what Amir Tyler said about Rutgers offense.
Their receivers, their skill players are very well. They're fast, talented, just can't sleep on them guys, regardless of whatever we think it is, it's a different game. They can come in there with a total different game scheme than they had the rest of the years or their spring games. So, to be honest, they're definitely a good team. They're not nobody to sleep on, and, you just got to stick to the plan.
Right. You guys can probably hear the rain. Sounds like it's picking up outside. I don't know if that's coming through on my mic, but I guess we're definitely not through the storm yet. So this podcast will be accompanied by the pitter-pattering sounds of rain outside my window here. But
if people listen to this before they go to bed, the soothing rain sounds will help calm them.
Well, we're recording this on, how quick are you turning this around, Sam? Because if we're probably listening to this tomorrow. So if they're if they're listening to it before they go to bed tomorrow, they're taking like a late morning nap. So maybe that'll be relaxing for them too. You never know. Maybe someone's working a night shift. They listen to the pod, maybe like late morning tomorrow. take a nap, they wake up refreshed for the game. Maybe that's how it's
I'm trying
going.
to think the weirdest place I've ever listened to a podcast would be. Nothing's coming to mind, but there has to be one like odd place I've listened to a podcast. It just doesn't
We
make
just
sense.
ease Temple fans into a nap before before watching the
Soothing
game.
scouting report of Dante Collinelli easing people into a nap.
Yes, it's just such a soothing voice. But this is also, I mean, one of the guys that we haven't talked about yet in that Temple secondary is Deshawn Winston, another guy who was an opt-out. And then, in spring ball, his name just started coming up again and again and again. And again, they like MJ Griffin. They say that MJ can play both spots. I think we've kind of said he might be, maybe more of an in-the-box guy and maybe Amir's backup. But they like Deshawn Winston. He's the other starting safety there. Big test for him too. Again, another guy who is going to be playing, really like significant snaps for the first time in his career against a good group of receivers. Now, I think maybe the biggest question mark on defense and something that could help them, and we just don't know how much they're going to help, is this defensive line. How much pressure can a guy like Will Rogers, Manny Walker in his second year in the program, is Leighton Jordan the next guy that they can groom to be an Arnold Ebiketie, a Quincy Roche, something like that. I think we've kind of said, whether we talked on this podcast or whether we're just talking amongst ourselves, that, maybe if you're Temple, you feel better about this game against a Rutgers offensive line that wasn't great last year. Again, they gave up 21 sacks in 9 games last season, but all of them are coming back. And so they've got some experience in that regard, but there is no Arnold Ebiketie. There's no, Ifan Maje's, playing for Rutgers, and he's been a little dinged up, but he's supposed to play in this game. The defensive line, again, you've got a guy like Jaquavian Mahone, another transfer from Kentucky, playing nose tackle, right? They're looking for him to kind of generate some pressure up the middle. But we don't know how well this line is going to be able to pressure a guy like Noah Vedral. Again, like on one hand, you've got some weapons on that side of the ball for Rutgers, but if Temple can force Vedral into mistakes, which he made last year, that I think would be their one saving grace. Again, Keyshawn Paul, Cameron Ruiz are solid corners. Maybe they're going to have great seasons. Freddie Johnson has been, I guess, an adequate corner. Temple recruited him as a receiver coming out of high school, converted him to a corner. But what are we expecting? And again, I think the answer is going to be, we'll have to wait and see. How much pressure do you think that this defensive line can put on Rutgers in this opener? And I guess maybe the follow-up question to that would be, and I think, Jeff Knowles was asked about this. Do you think Jeff Knowles comes out? Maybe the more appropriate question is, does he come out looking to blitz him right away and put some pressure on him with like maybe blitzing some linebackers, maybe blitzing a safety, something like that, to say, okay, I'm not quite sure what I have in Will Rogers. Again, played some good football for Washington State 2 seasons ago, played 2 games last year and then opted out. But there's no bona fide star on this line just yet. Now, again, Jeff Knowles might think differently. Maybe he thinks Nick Baggs is going to go out and, have 3 TFLs in this game and play his tail off. But again, that defensive line group, a lot of question marks there for now. You guys expecting them to try to just, kind of just rush what they have there? Or are you expecting maybe like a heavy dose of pressure and saying like, hey, let's see if we can flip the game right away and force a mistake there?
Yeah, I asked Jeff Knowles that question the last time that he was on, and he kind of said that he would bring pressure, but he spent most of the answer talking about how he likes to rush with 4 and he wants to get home with 4. So my assumption would be is that is what they're going to do. And if it's not working, then we might see a pivot for them to send pressure. And talking about Temple's defensive line as a whole, I mean, we just don't I don't know anything about these guys really, outside of Manny Walker. It's, Mahone barely played at Kentucky. Nick Baggs hasn't played at all. We haven't really seen Will Rogers in 2 years. I mean, even the 2 games that he played in the Pac-12 last year, that conference was a mess. The schedule was a mess. I don't even think it's fair to judge him off those games, frankly.
Right.
So I don't know enough about those guys. And the one thing that I will say is Rutgers offensive line, obviously, like John said, was not good last year. And I don't know if they're going to suddenly be good. Maybe they'll improve, but I think it's far-fetched to say that they're suddenly going to be stalwarts up there. I think the bigger challenge for Temple's defensive line will be staying disciplined if you watch Rutgers, they do a lot of weird stuff on offense, at least by college football standards. This is a team that's going to, direct snap to the running back. They're going to have a lot of pre-snap motion. Guys are going to come on jet sweeps. They're going to do a lot of different screen stuff. They're going to pull linemen. The quarterback run is in there. They had a tight end who took quarterback snaps last year, Johnny Loggins. They like to do a lot of weird stuff. So discipline, having your eyes in the right place is going to be very, very important for this defensive line. Rutgers is probably not going to give them a ton of opportunities to just pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. So being disciplined, being in your gap, and kind of minimizing the big play on these trick plays, because Rutgers is going to run them. They did them every game last year. There's at least 3 or 4 plays a game that are just out of Greg Schiano's butt, it looks like. So, that's going to be, I think, the big thing for the defensive line, but I don't know enough about these guys to say whether or not I'm confident in them. It's really just going to be a wait and see.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to what Dante said is that it seems to be a recurring theme across the board for Temple, that there are position groups that, or I guess a better way of putting it is, there's a lot of questions that we don't really have clear answers to that are going to be answered, or they could at least in part be answered, are going to clear things up a ton with this game against Rutgers. And the defensive line is absolutely one of those groups where there's a lot of guys on that defensive line that haven't played a whole lot for us to really make any concrete assessments of their game. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that group holds up against Rutgers offensive line.
And part of the conversation there, when Dante's talking about discipline, you got to throw the linebackers into that group. So again, looking at the depth chart, and not to say that these guys will be the only ones playing, that means George Reed at the will linebacker spot, weak side, Will Kwanku up the middle linebacker, and then Quantel Rains playing that Bubo position. Again, a West Virginia transfer, another guy who opted out, wasn't going to get the chance to play regardless because he didn't get the waiver to play right away, but a guy that hasn't played football in a year. He's a good player out of the Pittsburgh area, out of Aliquippa. He's got good size at 6'3", 200, but you've got a couple of, I would hesitate to call George Reed a veteran. He started to play some more significant snaps last year. And they like these younger linebackers, that they've talked about. You guys saw, for those of you who were listening, you saw Kobe Wilson last year play as a true freshman. We know how much the coaches think of him. They're excited about what they have in Yvonne Rigby and Jordan McGee in the middle, and McGee could be kind of a swing guy. I thought DJ Woodbury, I think we were talking about that in our group chat, kind of a bit of a surprise there, who's listed as the backup at Bubo instead of Thomas Joe Kamara, a guy like that. Again, all of this can change in a heartbeat. We could see different guys in the mix in the coming weeks. But when it comes time to talking about being disciplined and looking at all those, trick plays and a lot of the stuff that Rutgers does that Dante has rightfully pointed out, maybe it helps to have, again, I'm not saying that George Reed is a grizzled veteran, but a guy like Kwanku, I think we can agree that maybe at some point, guys like Kobe Wilson and Rigby and McGee, you maybe lap these guys, maybe they don't, but maybe it helps to have some veterans there that have played more football. But again, another group that's going to be tested there. You don't have, Isaiah Graham Mobley is not coming back, transferred to Boston College. There's a loss there. Now IGM had been banged up, of course, but another group that's, it's really going to be tested as well there. Looking at special teams, again, another area where you look at it again, just on paper and say, all right, maybe this isn't a great matchup for Temple. Not only has Temple really not much went right for them at all last season, but they didn't make anything happen in the return game, weren't great in coverage. And again, you've got, Cruikshank, who returned 2 kicks for a touchdown, Josh Youngblood, a guy that had been verbally committed to Temple out of the Tampa area, flipped to Kansas State. He is now at Rutgers. He's also a dangerous return guy. Let's talk about special teams for a second before we even get to Rory Bell and Adam Barry. Did you guys get the impression from our media availability that you're going to see more starters, or we think that you might see more starters playing on special teams? I know that they like their young depth, they like their young linebackers, but do you think Rod Carey and his staff, when they're approaching coverage, do you think they're at the point now where we're going to have to play more starters on special teams? Because what we have done in the past, for a multitude of reasons, I'm sure I'm not sitting and watching film with these guys, but they haven't been great in coverage. They've had lapses there. Do you think we're going to see a lot of like, when you're looking down your scorecard in the press box tonight? Oh, look, there's, I don't know, Amir Tyler out on special teams. There's Will Kwenku out on special teams. Do you think you're going to see a lot of starters out there? Again, I know they don't want to risk injuries in a perfect situation. You like to have some of your young depth on special teams, but again, it's been such an area of concern. You're looking at a couple of dangerous returners here. Do you guys think that you're going to see more familiar faces out there on the coverage units?
I think we should. I don't know if we will or won't, but I think we should. I think, frankly, this is the area of the game where I think Temple's the most outmatched. I think that, they can be in the ballpark on defense if, some of the new guys perform well enough. If Dwan Mathis has a solid game, I think they're comparable to that Rutgers offense. Youngblood and Krishik are arguably the two best returners in the entire country. Krishik was the top returner in the Big Ten last year. Youngblood was probably the best in the country, at the most return yards and return touchdowns, if I remember correctly. So those two guys are absolutely dynamic. Now, obviously, the benefit for Temple is that only one of them can return the ball, right? So, right. I don't know if Youngblood's going to be the kick guy and if Krishik's going to be the punt return guy. I don't know what that is necessarily going to look like. I don't remember the Rutgers depth chart off the top of my head. So
I don't think they list it on their depth chart, at least the one that I looked at this morning. They didn't list their specialists on returns. So I don't know.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So I think we should see starters on special teams, because if Temple is going to get blown out, it's going to be because, Rutgers gets a ton of short fields, or if Youngblood runs one back. Like, I think that is the area where they're going to struggle the most. And what's concerning about this, I know you want to stay away from our specialists, but like Adam Berry as a punter had like a good year last year. Like, he was very good. He was arguably the most consistent player on Temple's roster last year, which sounds ridiculous, but like was kind of true as the punter. Like, he was very good. And Temple was still really bad at stopping people from, getting return yards. And like Adam Berry was doing his thing, and people were still able to generate returns because they couldn't tackle on the back end. So like, again, the punter can only do so much. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but like, frankly, I wouldn't kick to these guys. Wouldn't kick to them. Punt out of bounds. Goodbye. Try and kick it out of the end zone. Wouldn't kick to them. They can't hurt me if they don't touch the ball. That would be my strategy. And like, that's very simple, easier said than done stuff. But like that, I don't know. Temple's kind of had this weird thing where like they try to kick it in like the corner instead of just kicking it through the end zone. Like, I don't let these guys touch the ball and they can't hurt you. I don't know.
Well, see, there's another problem there too. And, when we talk about Rory Bell, he was 5 of 5 on field goals last year, hasn't hit one longer than 30 yards. And he says he has range that extends out to 50 yards. We'll see. But an area where he struggled, and again, he can improve. He's young, just like Adam Berry was not a good punter 2 seasons ago. As Dante just said, he got a lot better last year. He was the second best punter in the conference. So he made marked improvement. Rory Bell struggled on kickoffs. Temple was a team that was, 10th out of 11 teams on kickoff returns last season in the conference, 105th nationally in kickoff coverage. They just had only 2 of their kickoffs went for touchbacks, which is an obvious problem. If they had a kickoff specialist or if Bell, now I don't know, maybe Bell got better. Maybe you're going to see him put some balls, into the back of the end zone that are going to go for touchbacks, which would obviously be huge against this team, given their return talent. But that's a problem. I don't know if another thing on special teams, and they've talked about Noah Botsford, the guy that they brought in from St. Thomas Aquinas High School down in Florida. Brett Dearson was talking about how much he likes him. He played in a big time program. I don't know how strong his leg is. I don't know if Bell on the opening kickoff, let's say Rutgers gets the opening kickoff and Bell lands his first kickoff at the 5, and you're thinking, oh boy, this, and it doesn't go well. Do they try Botsford as a kickoff specialist there? I don't know. But again, we only know what we know from last season. And Roy Bell was not a guy that was consistently banging him out into the back of the end zone for touchbacks. He had the one kickoff, I think, that went out of bounds at some point. So obviously, again, most people know this. You can put a punt out of bounds, put a kickoff out of bounds. You're going to be penalized for it. So I would agree with you, Dante. It sounds simple, but I would try to, if Adam Berry has gotten really good at punting out of bounds and putting some of these kicks into the corner, great. If Rory Bell has strengthened his leg and can, get some touchbacks, great. But if not, you're going to be relying upon what I would think should be some starters in there on special teams, because and you can tell too. I mean, these guys are just getting sick of answering questions about it. As long as it's an issue, fans are going to say, well, this is, we know the drill. If Fed Foley was still here, they'd be much better on special teams. They'd be blocking kicks and stuff like that. But, and it's going to be an issue. The one thing we don't know much of either is, how Temple's going to approach the return game. Because again, they haven't really, that wasn't an area where they made any difference last year. I think they returned like all of 4 punts last season. They just don't make anything happen in the return game. Do you think that obviously any coach would say, yeah, we want that to happen? Is that an area where Temple can improve? We know they can improve, but could we see anything in that area tomorrow night? Or again, for recording this on Wednesday night, you're listening to this on a Thursday. Anything you're expecting there? Anything in the way of Jaden Blue, returning kicks, or maybe anyone else they try there to affect the game differently?
I'm not getting my hopes up about Temple special teams doing anything to really affect the game until they do it. I'm not expecting it's going to happen until I see it, because Brett Dearson almost verbatim said that he wants to keep things simple. He doesn't want to go crazy on special teams. He said back in the spring, and again, I am paraphrasing. This is not exactly what he said, but this is for the gist of what he said back in the spring, was like, he wants to keep things simple because guys, as much as they put an emphasis on special teams, he said he understands it's not guys' main position. They're more concerned about their main position. So he wants to make things fun, simple, and just get the job done. So until I see it with my own 2 eyes, I'm not expecting anything out of the ordinary, out of the blue. Out of the blue from Temple on special teams.
Just seeing Sam's face light up and go,
I agree with Sam. I mean, I remember last year, I think somebody asked Rod in a post-game presser, like, hey, like, why aren't you guys returning the ball? And Rod was literally like, I just want them to fair catch it. And like, which is such a, for most people, just such a turnoff of an answer. Right. And again, I get where he's coming from, and that, but I think that and again, this isn't rocket science. If a coach is saying, I just want them to fair catch it, then don't have, obviously, if you had a dynamic returner back there, if you felt like you had a dynamic returner back there, the last thing you're going to tell them to do is fair catch it, unless the situation calls for it. Right. But when you hear a coach say that, it's just like such a bland answer, because again, this is a program that had made part of its mark on special teams. And I think that's been one of the criticisms of the staff. And again, it's not going to go away until they remedy it, if they can remedy it. But yeah, as Dante said, I just want them to fair catch it. I get like playing it safe, but at some point, if you're a team that's relying this much on transfers and this much on some young depth, what if you can win a game and turn a game on special teams? You're not going to do it by fair catching it, unless you're playing the field position game and you're playing the long game there. But you guys think it'll just continue in that fashion? And I guess even before I get to that, one of the things we didn't mention, yes, Jaden Blue is currently slated to be the punt returner. Devon Fox is a guy that's listed now on the depth chart. Maybe a bit of a surprise there. Maybe a younger receiver who's fast. Maybe he can make something happen on kickoff returns. But again, until he does it, we just haven't seen it there. It's just another question mark. Again, now if Jaden Blue can return a punt for a touchdown, we're talking about that as a success story, maybe a reason why they steal this game up there. But just you talking about I just want them to fair catch it. It just brings back memories of hearing that last year. And I'm thinking, this isn't going to play well. Not that these coaches really have to cater to a fan base, but I'm thinking people are going to hate hearing this. Yeah. I mean, I think, and Sam even, like, Dearson's quote kind of echoes the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he was just basically like, yeah, like, I'm going to keep it simple. We're not going to try and do anything crazy. And to me, that says like, okay, we're not going to send extra guys to block punts. You know what I mean? And like,
I don't get that. I know it sounds like and I'm sorry to cut you off. It is a sort of like it's a rallying cry of fans, and it sounds like a fanish thing to say, but yeah, I realize that there are programs in America that not everybody like sends the house all the time. But yeah, they don't even try. I get that, maybe you scale things back if you send a bunch of guys and then you're continually getting, roughing the punter penalties and stuff like that. But yeah, they just don't send guys. And I don't get that. I don't know why they play it safe, because it hasn't worked for them. I don't really get that.
I don't either. And I think even like the weirder part of it, and you kind of touched on this in your first segment there, was like, Temple identified with special teams for like, a long time, and arguably one of the better stretches in recent program history. Like that was, a part of their identity, right? Is like, okay, we're going to be Temple tough. We're going to win in the trenches, and we're going to win on special teams. And like, they won football games like that. They won football games like that under Matt Rule. They won football games like that under Jeff Collins. Like, they won on special teams, and it was a big factor for them, right? Sean Bradley, right, played on special teams. Sam Franklin played on special teams. Those are two guys who made 53-man rosters as special teams players, but they're also going to get run at their positions too. So they're not slouches, right? And like Temple identified with being good on special teams, right? Brandon McManus, kicker in the NFL. I mean, like this, like Temple and special teams, like that's a part of the brand. So like, that's why it's even weirder for me. There are good schools, like there are SEC schools who don't do much on special teams, right? But it's not their brand. Like Temple, like
they can afford not to do it.
Exactly. Right. Like Temple made that a part of why they were going to be successful for a long time. And it really helped them. They stole games on special teams for a couple of years. And I know like my frame of reference is not as long as yours is, John, but like even just the past couple of years, they stole games on special teams before Rod Carey came in. So like, again, it is very weird. Maybe they don't feel like they have the personnel for it. Like maybe that is what it is. I don't know, but like, even when they had some of those guys, even when they had Sam Franklin, even when they had Sean Bradley, they weren't really pushing the envelope then. So honestly, I think this is just the staff philosophy. I'd be interested to like go back to Northern Illinois and like see if they did anything differently there. I haven't really checked on that. But I just think this is the way it is. And I don't think it's going to change. I think we're going to see a lot of fair catches. I don't think they're going to send a lot of people to block punts or kicks. And we're just going to have to live with that. I really think that's what, I think the bigger part of this game is going to have to be, can they cover the Rutgers guys? If they can do that, all right, maybe special teams is a wash. And in a matchup like this, that's a win. But, if you're playing South Florida and you wash in special teams, I mean, I think that's a loss, right? So this is a conversation we can continue to have all year. But I don't think it's going to change. I really don't.
Yeah. All right, we've got some mailbag questions here. The first one comes from Green Street Owl, and he's asking, it's a two-part question here. Question one, around the horn, game by game predictions, and one out of the box prediction related to Thursday's game. So I don't want to disrespect Green Street Owl here. Let me ask Dante and Sam, I ask you guys this. Do we just want to do a prediction for this game? Do we really want to go down the whole schedule and predict every game? I get it. Like looking at the schedule, looking ahead, it's fun. They do it on talk radio when the Eagles schedule comes out. I just feel like we'd be spinning our wheels if we went with all the question marks on this team. Although Sam is raising his finger at me, maybe he wants to rifle through the schedule here.
I started to talk, but I was on mute. I think it's a next week thing. I think we all take 1 week to see what we see from this team, and then maybe next week we have some question to answer. And then maybe we can have more of a sense of what the season is. But as you said, right now it's so hard to. We're shooting blanks right now if we make predictions like that.
Well, I know, Kyle Gauss, our assistant editor, again, he's off tonight. Did a behind the enemy lines piece with the Rutgers site, and he predicted the Temple, I think, would it was either like 28-17, 31-17, something along those lines. Predicted a Temple loss. Well, again, predictions are, not worth much, but we'll do it. They can be fun. We'll go around the horn here just on this game. Sam, I'll start with you. Go to Dante. I'll go last. What are you thinking?
I'm gonna go with Rutgers 24, Temple 17. I think it's a close game up until like the third quarter, and then Rutgers pulls away, and then Temple kind of can't really close that, like struggles to really close that gap. That's my inclination. Rod Carey called this a 4-quarter game on Monday. He said it's implying it's the kind of game they're gonna have to grind all 4 quarters out if they're gonna win. But I think Rutgers wins it's probably a 2-score game.
Dante?
I'm going to go 35-24 Rutgers. I think they get the job done. I'm not very good at predictions though, for what it's worth. But
nobody is.
Yeah, right. I think Temple keeps it close for a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, I have a funny feeling Rutgers is going to get like a fluky touchdown or, on like a trick play or a special teams play that'll kind of separate the game a little bit. So I'm going to go with 35-24 Rutgers.
Yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit. And I was talking to Kyle about this. I don't think we're talking about a Rutgers team that is in the same league as, Ohio State or anything like that, but they've got some players. This Temple team does seem very confident to me. And I don't know if part of that is just like, look, last year was just such a crap show. We didn't start until October. We couldn't even practice at the same time. We had to lift and shifts. They seem very exuberant, very confident coming out of the first couple of weeks in camp. Up in the Bronx. And I think they like their team, I think, and not just in a like, hey, we like our team. I think they're very confident heading into this game and kind of like the fact that they're underdogs. And when I take a step back and I say, okay, again, they're not facing that great of a quarterback, but they are facing some good receivers, a pretty solid running back, a good secondary. I think there are avenues for Temple to win this game, and that, Dwan Mathis, if he is as good as advertised or as good as we think he can be, he doesn't have like, empty options there at receiver. Again, Jaden Blue's good. Randall Jones is good. David Martin Robinson's got some experience. We'll see if Jose Barbone and a guy like Ronnie Stevenson can complement them. But I think there are ways that Temple can win this game. I think that if they can generate some pressure, again, they're not facing a group of world beaters on Rutgers' offensive line. Part of me thinks it could be a close game. What I don't love for them is just like the special teams aspect of things. Again, something as simple as like, if Rory Bell can't get you a couple of touchbacks in this game, it's really risky for them in the return game. Until I've seen it, they haven't proven it yet. I think special teams hurts them. I agree with Dante. I think there might be one fluky play on offense. Again, Dante talked about how creative Rutgers is with its game plan, a lot of jet sweeps, a lot of different things. I think it's a 31-17, maybe a 31-24 type of game. I think this is going to sound like such a defeatist attitude of a fans hearing about this. I think obviously if they go out and win this game, I'll be impressed. And then I think my perception of the season changes a lot because of that secondary they're facing, because of the return options that Rutgers has. As of now, I'd have a hard time predicting a Temple win. Again, I agree with Dante. I think there's going to be some sort of fluky play that kind of maybe gives Rutgers a little bit of a cushion. But again, what the hell do I know? I thought they were going to win 6 or 7 games last season, and they obviously did not. So
they barely played 6 or 7 games last season.
Exactly. Yeah, should have known better. So yeah, maybe we'll take a deeper look at the schedule after next week. Question number 2 from Green Street Al. I haven't read anywhere about how COVID testing is going to work. Does the team have a high enough vaccination percentage they can avoid it? Or are we going to see the same game day circus atmosphere like last season? So I've talked to a few people about this. I think when Green Street Owl was talking about the game day circus atmosphere, COVID in general, the ECU game where you had 4 guys, pulled from the lineup right before the start of the game. They're playing with their 5th string quarterback. From what I've been told, the program feels pretty good about the number of players who are vaccinated. Those who aren't get tested regularly and aren't even permitted inside the team's facility at Edberg Olson Hall. So, far be it from me to predict anything in terms of how things are going to go with this pandemic, but I think things will be a lot more stable for them than they were last year in terms of where they feel they are with their vaccination rate and testing. I don't think it's going to be like what we saw last year. And I think just for humanity's sake and for their sake, I hope it's not that type of situation. I don't think it will be. Green Street Owl also said, thanks and keep up the great work. Cheers to a good season and bowling. So he's hoping for a bowl game, like I'm sure most fans are. Second question comes from DBlaze75. Again, these are screen names on our owlscoop.com message boards. question there. What do you think is going to be the biggest problem area for the Owls on Thursday? For example, stopping the run, special teams, et cetera. What is going to be the biggest area of success for the Owls? What do you guys think?
I can take this one first. I'm going to stray away from special teams because we just talked about that a little bit. I think one problem area for them, and we talked in a good chunk earlier in the show about how strong Rutgers secondary is. I think as strong as DeJuan Mathis's arm is, I think it's going to be tough for him to be able to establish a deep ball at any point in this game. I think finding any consistency or any rhythm with the deep ball is going to be a problem area for Temple.
Dante, what do you think?
Yeah, I think problem area for me is going to be running the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Offensive line was not good at it last year. This is a group of running backs that are incredibly unproven. RB1, Edward Sadie, and RB3, Dobbins there. I mean, they ran for like 121 combined yards last year. And then Trey Blair, who's the RB2, it was a safety convert. So like very scary. I think area of success with Rene out, I think that they can win some matchups on the outside in the passing game. Now, I agree with Sam. I'm not sure those are going to be like 50-yard completions, but like, I could see Jaden Blue catching a slant and making a guy miss and picking up 30 yards, mostly on the ground, right? Like I could see him winning at the line of scrimmage against a backup corner. So I think that could be an area of success for this team, but I do agree with Sam. I don't think this is going to be, DeJuan Mathis dropping bombs for 4 quarters. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think that they can win on the outside and in the short to intermediate areas of the field for sure.
Dante, just a follow-up here, and it might sound like a simple question, but we've talked about this with DeJuan Mathis. Again, we have to see it, but what we think that he can do, walk listeners through what could potentially change with him at quarterback when the initial read breaks down, the initial play breaks down. Look, there were some times where Anthony Russo could roll to his right and throw on the run. He's got a strong arm. They did try to run him a little bit, but again, he can't run it. And not that Anthony Russo ever, promoted himself as this big time, like dual threat quarterback. They would try to run him a little bit, but he was more of a pocket passer. Again, he had his moments, put up some good numbers, but there were times obviously where he tried to rely on his arm talent and made some bad decisions. What's potentially possible for Temple with DeJuan Mathis at quarterback when things initially break down? And again, we're not talking about just design runs. What changes on the field when he can shake a guy loose and a Jaden Blue, a Randall Jones, a Ronnie Stevenson, Jose Barbone looks back and says, oh, I can alter my route here. What's possible for them in terms of what he can do in the pocket to extend plays?
I mean, so much, right? Like that wasn't a part of Temple's game plan, right? And you don't game plan that per se, but like, with Russo at quarterback, like you said, he had his certain, like he was good at a lot of stuff. Anthony Russo's a good, college quarterback,
right?
But he was not going to be a guy who avoid pressure, right? Step away from a blitz. If they got into the backfield, Russo was going down if the ball wasn't out of his hands like that. And, that's none fault of his. Like you said, he was not the best athlete in the world. Mathis gives you an opportunity to where, the right tackle screwed up, but Mathis just out athleted the defensive end and he rolls out to his right. And Jaden Blue sees that. And maybe the corner's in good positioning, but Blue works back to the ball and it's a 7-yard completion instead of a 7-yard sack, right? Like it doesn't even always have to be a big play, right? It doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball 35 yards across his body. Even when you can turn, a 3-yard sack into a 5-yard completion, right? Like you say Mathis, he gets out of the pocket and he just dumps it off to Trey Blair on 3rd and 2 and they get 4. Right. Like that's an incredibly positive play. So I think that's what you get with Mathis, right? A better athlete. And I think that opens up a lot of stuff. And again, you can't really plan for that, right? Like you expect that it will happen at some point, but it's not like they're going to go out there and they're going to say, all right, we are not going to block the defensive end and we're going to let Mathis make a move and have him roll out. Right. We're not going to see that, but it gives Temple more opportunities. The range of outcomes on every play is better with DeJuan Mathis at quarterback if he can figure out the other part of his game, right? And he can be, good inside of structure as well. But his ability to create outside of structure, could be, a really, really important thing in this game because, it goes to other things as well, right? The red zone. Temple struggled in that last year with Anthony Russo quarterback. The first couple games of the year, they really just could not punch the ball in. They had the 2-point conversion where Russo made the wrong read in the red zone. They couldn't get that done, right? Mathis, if you can create in the red zone, that's a condensed space. It's even easier to run the scramble drill there because, the corners they're already pressed for space, right? So like you are able to work in a little window in the red zone. If you're rolling out, is a huge advantage. So Mathis expands the range of outcomes on plays in a positive way, simply put. And again, the big thing for him is going to be in a structured play. Like that's where I'm worried. I'm sure he'll make a couple of really nice plays outside the pocket, but yeah, it'll be a big deal for Temple, and it will be a way to throw off these safeties, right? Because they're really good in their schemes. They're really, really disciplined. Rod Carey said that this week. But if you can get them in the scramble drill, those schemes start to break down. Those responsibilities start to break down. So it makes things easier.
My final question here from the message boards. I'm just double checking here. We don't have any more. Last question here comes from Park Al again from our message board. His question is, which transfer out of the program is going to be the most missed, and which transfer in, excluding Mathis, will have the biggest impact?
I think Arnold Ebiketie is unequivocally the most missed transfer out. Yep. Transfer coming in with the biggest impact, excluding DeJuan Mathis. I'm buying myself time while I think about an answer. I think I'm going to go with, I'm forgetting someone. I'm going to go with Will Rogers. I think he could be the kind of guy on the defensive line that becomes that standout guy, maybe 3, 4, even 5 games into the season, that proves to be that guy on the defensive line that is able to rush the quarterback the way we've seen Temple defensive lines in the past. So I think Will Rogers is probably my answer.
What do you think, Dante?
I'll give 2 different answers, but I do agree that Ebiketie is easily the most missed guy. I will give a similar answer. I think Chris Banks is a big one. I thought he was one of the few guys who had a good year last year on defense. And I thought that he really could have taken a year 2 jump, and kind of the same reason, right, that we're going to miss Ebiketie is that pass rush, right? Like Banks was pretty explosive. He got some penetration. So I'll go with that. And then I think biggest transfer in, I'm going to cop out and say 2 guys, but they play the same position. It's the corners. Yeah. If you can't cover in the American, you're not going to win this conference. Like if you cannot cover, you're not going to win the conference, even if you're a good team. We saw a couple of years ago when Temple went to SMU and SMU just burned them for days because they struggled to cover that day. They lost to UCF that year because they struggled to cover on the outside a little bit, and they had Harrison Hand, who was an NFLer. So like, you need to cover at multiple spots. So I think those 2 corners will be the big guys coming in.
Yeah, I would have to go. I agree with you. Ebiketie's just such a loss for them. And I thought that, based off of his makeup and how he is, for Temple's sake, I thought, maybe he's a guy who sticks around and doesn't think about the grass being greener on the other side. But, Penn State obviously had their way of putting some feelers out to him, and he ends up in the Big Ten. And if he continues to progress the way he has, I do think we'll be seeing him in the NFL. So he's a huge loss. Yeah, I think, if you look at Rodgers now, if Rodgers ends up being the guy making the biggest impact, then again, maybe we're talking about Temple being closer to a 7-win team. But it's hard to argue with the corners too, as Dante said, again, that almost every team in the American, short of maybe Navy, and they're such an extreme case because they run the triple option. Every team in the American likes to spread you out. And if, Keyshawn Paul and Cam Ruiz have to be good, as does a guy like Freddie Johnson, as does, Ty Mason, Elijah Clark, the safeties, everybody's got to be good in the secondary. But I agree with you, Dante. the corners have to be good. And again, they were good. Keyshawn Paul was, I would dare say, pretty good, even really good at UConn a couple of years ago. And again, I know that Ruiz wasn't the best corner at Northwestern, still part of a very good defense and knows how to play. Again, how good they'll be in Temple scheme, we'll have to see. But, those guys have to be good. If they're not, it's going to be an even longer season. And, again, I think that Temple has to bounce back and show some progress. And if you can see that they're heading in the right direction, a 6-win season might be easier to swallow if you look and say, okay, DeJuan Mathis showed that he's the real deal. Maybe, wow, Ed Sadie can really run. Trey Blair can be good. Maybe a younger guy like I don't know, maybe a younger corner flashes and you see some signs of progress. But again, if guys like Keyshawn Paul and Cam Reeves can't cover, like Dante said, could be a really, really long season, because we didn't go through the whole schedule, but on paper, it's definitely not easy. So that'll do it for this week. Great stuff, guys. Again, it'll be fun to have a game to cover. Again, follow Dante for our coverage. Follow Sam. It's going to be covering the game for the Inquirer, still part of our staff as well. Happy for you guys to get up there, cover some football. I'll be with you when they come back home. A couple of weeks, they'll be playing Boston College. So I'll see you guys there, but see you guys on the post-game Zoom press conference as well. So thank you to all of you for listening. Happy for everyone to get some college football that they can watch. And thanks for sticking around for another episode, and we'll talk to you soon.